Good afternoon. We're going to do better. Good afternoon.
Afternoon.
Wonderful. The greeting is a very important cultural stipulation for me. I come from a culture where you can't begin to address any audience without offering salutation. And if you offer salutation and you didn't get a response, that would be the audience's very polite way of saying to you, take a hike. So, all right, my name is Okey Ndibe, if that's okay with everybody. If it isn't, we can modify it. And I'm here to talk about my novel, Foreign Gods, Inc. Some years ago, many years ago indeed, a Nigerian poet, Chinwezu, wrote a poem, one of the shortest poems that I've ever read, and the poem says, "These natives are unintelligent. I can't understand their language." Right? These natives are unintelligent. I can't understand their language. And so, for me, I've always been invested. I've always been interested in the question of language, the ways in which language forms identity as well as decodes and unsettles identity. And so 2 days ago, or 3 days ago actually, I was at City College in New York to give a reading. And finally, somebody in the audience got it. In the opening first chapters of my novel, the protagonist, Ike Uzondo, is reflecting on the proper way to say his name. His name is Ike, not Ike. Can you hear the difference? Ike instead of Ike. Who hears the difference? Okay, same spelling, but Ike means power, strength. Ike, on the other hand, means your ass. And so in a lot of ways, at the end of the novel, which is what this particular reader at City College got, the novel raises the question, is my protagonist somebody who exudes great moral and ethical strength, or is he an ass? See? Well, so Ike Uzondo is somebody who's come to this country with great expectations and is gone to Amherst College to get a degree in economics. And he's a particularly good student. So he gets a cum laude in economics. His expectation, of course, is that he's going to get a job in the corporate world. But he finds out that in order to play for a job, he needs this ticket that is called the green card. And so, like many immigrants, he has to get into an arranged green card bride marriage in order to get a green card. Once he gets it and begins to apply for jobs, he's called for interviews, but when he goes there, he speaks in a particularly strong accent. And this becomes, again, the question of language becomes a very important recurrent tension in the novel. Because when he speaks, the way he speaks becomes the way that sort of alienates him from the job that he expects to get in the corporate world. So Ike becomes a cab driver, and 13 years later, after graduation, is still driving cabs. So finally, Ike who's become a gambler, become an alcoholic, and has gone through a terrible divorce from the woman that he married to get his green card. Ike reads a magazine article talking about this gallery in New York City called Foreign Gods, Inc. And the gallery buys and sells the statues of deities as well as other sacred objects that are pushed from different parts of the world. So Ike is at a point in his life with all the gambling and all the alcoholism and so on, and all the tensions in his life, with his mother back in Nigeria, his widowed mother asking for support, his sister asking for financial support. Having lost everything in this divorce, he's susceptible to a particular temptation to engage in what is his ultimate gamble, which is to return to his community in Nigeria to steal what used to be the god of war for his people in order to sell it to the gallery. So again, the novel brings up the question of the commodification of the sacred. we've read so many different novels that talk about just the idea of obsessive consumption as part of the trend, if you like, in postmodern life. People want more and more and more things. But then the commodification of the sacred, of the ineffable, becomes a new dimension that this novel introduces. When Ike ultimately brings the deity, he has to negotiate with the gallery owner over the price of the deity. So the mode of valuation of cultures becomes a subject that is important in this novel. And so wherever I've been to quite a few places. I've been very fortunate that the book came out in hardcover and it was adopted by numerous professors, and I've been invited to different universities. And one of the questions, one of the observations that students have made, one that stood out was a student that I encountered who said, "You've told my father's story as well as my uncle's story." And he said his father graduated with an MBA and had a job in the corporate world for a while, was laid off, and wasn't able to get another job, so he got stuck as a cab driver. And then he says he has an uncle with a master's degree who is also a cab driver. I arrived here a day early because the Nigerian community in Dallas, once they found out that I was coming, said, "We want you to come give us a reading." So they arranged for me to meet with them. And a number of the people who came there were PhDs who are cab drivers. And so this is a story that resonates with students because a lot of them are immigrants from Eastern Europe, from Asia, from different parts of Africa, and therefore they know this story in a rather intimate way. That this is a narrative that is not unfamiliar at all, even to Americans who have been born in this country. So the other question that students have raised is the whole ethical and moral dimension of this story. Ike decides to go steal a deity whose chief priest is his own uncle. And when he arrives in Nigeria, he discovers that there is a very tense relationship between his mother, who has joined an evangelical Christian group, and his uncle, who is a custodian of this deity. We live in a world that is rife with religious tension. Nigeria, which is my natal country, as you all know, is in the grips of Boko Haram attacks that have actually just 2 days ago forced the government, the Electoral Commission, to postpone elections for 6 weeks that were supposed to hold on the 14th, on Valentine's Day. And so every day people are grappling with the question, what is it about religion? What is it in this nature of faith that predisposes some people to use it as a tool of brutal differentiation and to use it as an occasion to launch violent attacks against their fellows? And so this novel brings that question to the fore. But I think that part of the power of this particular novel, and one of the things that students have remarked on, is the ways in which they realize that they are implicated in this culture that does what? That poaches the artifacts of different other cultures. And we all do that to one degree or another. Sometimes we do it in innocent ways, right? We travel to different cultures. We go to Guatemala and we go to Peru and so on, and you want to bring back a piece of it. So a way of authenticating yourself. Well, what Ike has done in this novel, and what Foreign Gods, Inc., the gallery in my novel, has done, is to create an entire economy that is based on the exoticizing of different far-flung cultures and on the capitalist valuation of those artifacts that are stolen from those different communities. And so the other thing is that students are engaged with the question of greed. Because in a lot of ways, in fact, a professor at Drexel University, when I visited there, said that he saw my novel as an extended study of greed. Okay? So you see the greed of the gallery owner, who you get the sense that in the end he takes advantage of Ike once Ike brings the deity. You also see Ike in his progression, to the decision finally to go steal the deity. You see that Ike is surrendering, if you like, to those impulses of greed. And so at a time when we hear all kinds of horror stories from Wall Street, when we hear of Ponzi schemes where people have stolen billions and billions of dollars from innocent investors, students are able to engage with all of that, the narrative of greed that the novel emphasizes. There's also a moment in my novel where I introduce Reverend Walter Stanton, the first missionary to arrive in Otonke, which is the setting in Nigeria where the deity is taken from. And Walter Stanton enters the narrative, if you like, in a time that is not contemporary to the novel, in the past. And he comes and he brings an interesting tension in his discussion of his Christian God with the natives. There's a particular moment where Reverend Stanton is telling the natives that the God he serves owns everything, including the river and the wood out of which their own deity is carved. And they said to him, "Where is this your God?" And he says, "That God is invisible." Now, in my culture, Igbo culture stipulates that a deity be visible, that a deity have a body. So deities participate in our human nature. In fact, people bring deities into being to serve a particular purpose. And so a deity has to have an address. It's called a shrine. It has to have a body. A deity eats, which is why you pour libation. A deity eats and drinks. And when a deity has stopped serving the purpose for which it was brought into being, the community actually commits deicide. The deity is killed. And so the whole idea of the invisibility of the divine is strange to the natives. And so there's an important moment in the novel when the natives are insisting, even the converts, on a particular kind of accountability. And that accountability for them is that the deity ought to be visible. And they said to him, "If your deity can appear to us in person, and then all our people who haven't converted will come join the religion." And so, of course, Reverend Stanton says, "Well, the deity has chosen to be invisible." And the villagers said to him, "Why not ask him to become visible, right?" And he says, "You can't tell God what to do." And they said, "No, you don't tell him. Take sacrifice and beg him." And they say it's through sacrifice that deities are deceived. And of course, Stanton gets upset when one of the converts suggests that maybe your deity is owing somebody, and that's why it's chosen to be invisible. Because around here it's only people who owe debts, who choose invisibility. And so he launches into this very angry attack, and at the end he says to them, "By the way, there will be no more questions today." So that whole tension, the ways in which cultures meet, the ways in which religions speak to one another, and sometimes with great respect and harmony, but often with violence, is a subject that students are very, very excited to discuss. And that moment where Stanton is talking to the convert in the novel is a particularly resonant moment for the novel, and a moment that students like to discuss when I visit them in school. So thank you very much.